Hey, so good afternoon. I am Anto Buriarjo. This is Monday Live, something that we do every Monday at 3 o'clock. So you all know that who the panelists are. The list is on mondaylive.org. Just as a reminder, views expressed here are personal, not of any company or organization. And you know how to use the Zoom tools by now. This slide deck will be available on mondaylive.org as well. So this is a new month of September, and we're going to spend 3 weeks of September, of Mondays in September, talking about the Coalition for Smarter Buildings, which is a new coalition that we're going to hear about today. So looking forward to that. Our agenda, normal chit chat, introduction to C4SB, as the coalition is known by, and follow-on discussion. So before we do that, as normal, sort of hand it over to Ken. What's in your mind?
Thanks. Okay, we've got our September issue online, Smarter Sustainability, and in addition to that, I wrote the next chapter article for Connected Contractor of the same title. Basically added some stuff that had occurred after we got the issue online. And the other thing I want to point out is we quite often talk about what we're doing, and then we always have a sidebar about what IoT is doing and the different approaches. And I think we've got to spend more time understanding what it is we don't know. And to that example, I posted this LinkedIn. The kids, as I call them, the kids, when you're as old as I am, everybody's a kid. And the kids are like 40 and 50 years old now, but they've been working, and they started a startup that grew out of SES Consulting, which was my original consulting company that turned over to the kids. And they basically took it in a carbon-free direction. Been kind of a part of that on just watching what they're doing. And they basically have spun off this startup, which is basically in the business of energy auditing. But of course, they don't call it energy auditing, it's carbon auditing. And they've kind of done a complete circle around, and it looks like they've lassoed some seed money. So it's kind of interesting to sort of see that grow from the old roots. And the other interesting thing is that when they asked my advice on this, I told them this will never work. No folks will ever invest in carbon, and you better find another financial model. And of course, how wrong was I? And it does seem to be a trend, and it is starting to be what we're all talking about. So that's an interesting twist, I think, that occurred there. And kind of feeding on that, the big words IoT ushers in a new era of convergence of IT, OT, and web services. We're starting to see a lot of folks looking at the open standard like MQTT. If you're like me and didn't know what the heck that meant, it's a lightweight publishing, subscribing, messaging protocol for M to M. And I think it was actually generated for the pipeline industry, so they could send short messages over satellites to basically be able to control pumping on pipelines. Many years ago, but it is actually, because it was given as an open standard and made available to folks, it's starting to gain power again. So interesting again. I think we have to spend more time trying to understand what it is we don't know. And the IT is certainly a whole bunch of things going on that we don't know. Back to the Adept startup, it basically grew out of just computerizing the auditing process. And in addition to that, basically looking at how data mining was going, how Bitcoin was evolving, and all of these techniques that they were using. So rather than using traditional auditing type thinking, they used more of the IT type thinking, which was kind of interesting. Okay, in addition to that, there's I'm a little confused here, sorry. There is a good link on LinkedIn there. What happens when you use open standard like MQTT? And you'll see that embedded inside of that are the protocols we're used to, BACnet LON. But basically a better connection to databases and stuff on an IT level. So some interesting stuff going on there, I think. We're presently working on preparing the AHR Expo for Vegas education sessions. We're trying to get that together. Scott Cochran has stepped in to provide the on-site function that I usually do. I'll be supporting him in any manner I can remotely. So we'll see how that goes. I think that's probably enough.
Great. Thank you, Ken. We have Mark. Muted.
Thank you. So here we are, roughly 18 months since COVID became part of our everyday life. And what I found interesting, this is I forgot to put the link on there, but this is a new survey research piece that Honeywell did on rethinking buildings post-COVID. And again, obviously, what was interesting for me was that dealing with COVID still remains extremely high. 75% of facility managers still are rethinking how they are going to operate their facilities. 60% are looking at indoor air quality optimization and other healthy building solutions. And again, for me, none of these numbers, the percentages, all are still remaining in and around the same thing. Even if we go back 12 months or 14, 15 months, the numbers remain roughly the same. So I think the whole COVID thing is still an awareness, high awareness level. And what I walked away with is these 5 themes from the survey. The pandemic will likely have a lasting impact on FM and ops, which I think no surprise there. COVID-19 remains a source of widespread unease. A healthy building is still top priority. Digital transformation is accelerating because of COVID. And respondents were interested in upgrades to improve the occupant experience. So again, for me, is all of this stuff we've been talking about for the last 18 months remains relatively high and part of the conversations. Back to you, Anthony.
Thank you. Moving on, before we jump into C4SB, Ken, you mentioned AHR. I think a lot of us are starting to think about that since it's September. I've been doing some planning, and as far as they're concerned, speaking to various people at AHR Expo, it is going on. It's going on as a physical event, so that's good to hear. And also Wilcom and IBCon, I spoke to Howard and Jim Young earlier today. And as far as they're concerned, this is going to be 100% a physical event. So it's kind of interesting to see that both of them are committed to the physical event, and hopefully everything goes smoothly for that.
Yeah, just to add on to that. And so last week in the UK, they had an award ceremony here where they had 560 people turn up for just an evening award. There wasn't a mask in sight, and general feeling was that really in terms of business-wise, other than Q1 from last year, the market is doing okay. Sorry, Q2 last year, sort of March through to June, when everybody started, they didn't know what was going to happen during the first lockdown, but everybody seemed to be buzzing, and business has been okay ever since. So it's quite a confusing issue with regards to, the people not making up their minds what to do with buildings and such. And I did see an article which I'll put on. I haven't put it on a slide, but I'll put it on a link in a minute. But Cushman and Wakefield kind of released something on, well, you know, the effect of labor on the CRE industry, and I have to say it's a bit confusing, sort of between the unemployed and the number of job openings, which industries are actually doing well and which are not. I didn't really get a lot of time to look at it, but it looks quite a fascinating report. I think it's free to download, so I'll put the link on in a second for people to look at. But in general, yeah, you know, talking about physical exhibitions and that, certainly they've started happening here with a vengeance.
Great, good to hear. Any other thoughts or comments before we move on? Take that for a no, and I'm going to bring on Rick Justice. Rick is the managing director of the Coalition for Smarter Buildings, and we'll have him explain what C4SP is all about. It's about 10 minutes on that, and then we'll have a chit chat about what it is doing and how we as the Monday Live group has been working with the coalition on that. So Rick, are you there? You're muted and you don't have the camera on, otherwise all is good. Hello.
There we go. I had the icons blocked. I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Okay. Yeah, loud and clear. So welcome, Rick. If you can maybe introduce yourself and then introduce the coalition.
Great.
All
And
yours.
you're gonna do the slides for me, right?
Yep,
Awesome.
I can do that.
The computer crashed right as we started, of course. So I'm on my backup computer. Yeah, well, thanks for inviting me to be part of this, and also thanks for everything you've been doing to get the coalition launched. My name is Rick Justice, Managing Director of the Coalition for Smarter Buildings.
Can you come closer to the microphone a bit? You're a little.
Okay, can you hear me better now?
Yeah, that's a bit better. Thanks.
Okay, so running the coalition or helping to guide the coalition is one of the things I'm doing. I actually do have a day job too. Some of you know me from 75F. I've got a few different business cards I've been part of over the last few years. But we're going to talk about the coalition mostly today. And what is this? And I'm actually going to start with the logo of what are we about and what is this that we're doing? And first thing is, you know, I love it when an acronym actually tells you what's going on. And that is that we're about buildings. We're not about cities or residences. We are about commercial buildings. We're about trying to make them smarter. And we are a coalition that is attempting to do that. So again, I think we picked a pretty good name. It tells you what we're all about. So next slide actually kind of goes back to a few months ago when we were thinking about how to have a greater impact and how to accelerate what's happening in our industry. We had some assumptions that we wanted to sort of test, and it turns out all of them were true, which is good. Our industry of smarter buildings and the companies and the individuals that are in it we are ready to go big, which is important because what we're trying to do with this trade organization, we're trying to position to policymakers that by implementing more of our technologies, we can have a significant impact. And policymakers, in my experience, aren't interested in doing things small. They're not interested in doing things that are that have minor impact. They want to do things that have a big impact. But we had to kind of test that assumption as well. Another thing about what we're all about is that we're really focused somewhat narrowly on the part of the smarter building space that is about data and analytics. You know, we're not about construction technologies. We're not about reforming how architecture is done, but we're all about trying to get more data and analytics for all buildings. And we needed to sort of test whether our focus was going to be sort of welcomed, it was going to be interesting to the industry, to policymakers, and also whether it fit in with what else is already going on in the industry in terms of like the ASHRAEs and the BOMAs and the other organizations. And then we also wanted to make sure that before we launch anything, that state, local leaders and federal folks are actually ready to act, and that there is money. So those assumptions all turned out to be true. And so we started, next slide, decided to make C4SB real. And we created a nonprofit 501c3 to be an industry trade organization focused on education and advocacy of our trade. And we also, over the past few months, we tested the assumptions that we were making by having early contact with different organizations, different agencies, mayors, governors, to make sure that what we were assuming would be true. And then right in the middle of that, we got we had the opportunity to work with some of the people on this group on what was a reach out from the White House CEQ. Help me with CEQ. Is that Committee for Environmental Quality or is it Commission?
Council for Environmental Quality.
Oh for 2. Council for Environmental Quality. It's an office inside of the White House. They reached out to some of the folks that were considering putting this coalition together. Said, hey, we could use some guidance and some feedback on some things we're thinking about making a priority. That was really good news. That was a great confirmation of what we were thinking about was going to be welcome. The CEQ then went on to introduce us to several key people at the Department of Energy in the Building Technologies Office. Did I get that one right? BTO. Yeah. And we had really early good feedback that an industry trade group speaking as a voice, being an official entity, was something that they really thought was a great idea, and they felt like we were on the right track. So, as an organization, we admitted 17, I think, founding members, formed some committees, and proceeded to continue on having more meetings in DC and elsewhere. We also brought on a couple of consultants. Some people call them lobbyists. They call themselves consultants. But we're lucky to have great connections in DC from prior lives, and to be able to have these very well connected consultants wanting to help us get the word to the right people, make the right connections, set up the right channels for communication and for getting things done. So that's been the last 3 months. Is that about right? And in that process, on the next slide, I think we go into sort of what our focus is. So again, back to those assumptions being true first, the assumptions turned out to all be true, but we had some aligning to do and some focus as an industry. What can we contribute? What can we actually bring to the table to help move the objective forward? And a really smart man that some of us met a couple of weeks ago said this is sort of like a campaign. You have to have a message, you have to have a messenger, you have to have money, but the key thing is the message. And the most important thing is to figure out what the message is. And so the themes of our campaign, or the focus of what we're trying to do as a group, is to promote and advocate interoperability of technologies that are in this analytics and data smarter building space. And we think that interoperability is a really key as opposed to standalone silos or proprietary. Everything needs to be interoperable at some point. Otherwise, we're not going to ever get to where we need to be relative to optimizing buildings around our key objectives. So interoperability is helping to define that, and how that happens is a key focus. Analytics is the number 2, the second on the list. Maybe it should be number 1, but the theme of analytics everywhere is a key idea that we've got. We want to promote. That it was told to us by the Department of Energy. Maddie from the Department of Energy said that without analytics everywhere, we'll never meet the goals that we have of carbon reduction and cost and comfort optimization. And that's really true. We can't just sit back and let analytics only be applied to the biggest buildings or to the most expensive buildings. We really do have to have analytics for every building. for every device, or we won't get to the goal. And we need to help show how that happens. We can't show how that happens. Specifications is the next one. We're focused on bringing examples of what it looks like to do a building that is smarter, and literally working on the specifications that somebody can use so that they don't have to start from scratch every time they want to have a building that has these sorts of capabilities. So that work is underway, and we're actually following the guidelines of the master format, if people are familiar with that. Master format lays out the 50 different divisions of how to build a building, whether you're doing from scratch or you're doing a major retrofit. Architects and engineers live by those sorts of details. We're following that specification. We're creating a new, sliding in a new little numbered section called 2525. Stay tuned for that. Fourth thing I've got on the list of what we're focused on is procurement, and more specifically sort of procurement reform and procurement creativity. Got to use existing methods of procurement, but we need to figure out how to make sure that when people are trying to procure a smarter building solution, that it doesn't get left on the curb as the project gets done. We need to also look at, and we will be looking at, sort of major procurement reform, but in the near term, it's how do we leverage the existing types of procurement vehicles that are out there. And then the fifth thing on the list is workforce. It's really key to all policymakers, whether it's a mayor or a superintendent or a governor or a president. Workforce development's a real key, and things like, what's the curriculum to be able to train the workforce, and what are the job descriptions and career tracks, and all the things that were focused on Monday Live, I think 2 months ago. So those are the focus areas and what we're taking action to accomplish. And what's on the next slide? I think this is the last slide. And a couple of fundamental things that are helping to guide us, and some resources that'll start to appear on our website. I should say the website's a work in progress. We secured the name, luckily, the domain. We're building the website to be something more useful, but these sorts of resources are some of our guiding fundamental principles of the coalition. One being the smarter stack, colorful rainbow guide for figuring out how products, companies, and processes all work to accomplish smarter buildings. And I put up there the grid interactive efficient building roadmap as another one of the key things that's helping to sort of guide us in terms of what we're interested in advocating, because that is certainly been told to us as that's the Bible for the Department of Energy in terms of buildings in the BTO office. And that is that. So that's a real quick overview of what the coalition is all about. As I said, the website is in process of being made more useful, actually, and more better place to get resources and data about what we're working on. But membership is the last thing I wanted to mention. I didn't do a slide on it, but the way we're structured, as I mentioned before, we brought in 17 founding members. We already have several more companies that are interested in, companies and individuals that are interested in joining. And there are different ways to join. You can join as an individual or as a company. And I think that the information that's on the website has actually not been updated with our latest thoughts on what those membership levels cost. But I think the individual membership to join is something in the neighborhood of $150. Is that, I think that's what we decided. And for corporations of different sizes, there's different tiers, 2,000, 5,000, and anybody's got 20,000, we'll take that from big companies. So that was a real quick run through, but again, the coalition is really aimed at taking action at state level, federal level, local level, to advocate and and change the way things are being done currently, so that we end up with more smart buildings or smarter buildings, and stop creating buildings that don't allow for this optimization around these areas of carbon and cost and comfort. And I know I forgot one key point I think we talked about before, that the E and the R on the end of smarter. As I said, we had thought about doing something that was more about cities, but it was going to be about buildings. That was much more focused. That's much more about what we're all about. And then it was smart buildings, and we very quickly, Anto's suggestion was not smart buildings, but smarter buildings, because that becomes something that every building can get better, a process, a journey, versus a specific. This is designated as smart. I'll stop.
Wonderful. That's great. Thank you very much, Rick. That was a great introduction. We thought we will spend a bit of time later talking about those 5 areas of focus. But before that, I'm going to put it to the team here in terms of your thoughts of the coalition. And it's been, obviously, we've been discussing it internally for quite a while, trying to figure it out. And why do you think this matters, doing this? And would love to get all of our thoughts. And also, by the way, those in the audience, if you want to opine and chat, just put your hand up or ping me, or put a message in. So to the group first, why is this important? Who wants to start? Nobody wants to start.
Okay.
I'll start. Okay.
Go ahead, Steve. You just flipped the
All right.
coin. You won. Okay.
Yeah, thanks. So I think if you think about the Monday Live panelists and largely our Monday Live audience, we are largely independent thinking, independent minded, entrepreneurial in our approach to this industry. And we have and I think the thing that I find attractive about the C4SB is an opportunity for this group to be recognized for our leadership in this at a policy level across all the different government areas, whether it's local, state, or federal. The fact that we've been able to get attention already at the White House, at the Department of Energy, and so on, I think is very significant. I think we're able to craft a message based on the 5 things that Rick just introduced, but whether those 5 reflect a lot of the conversations that this Monday afternoon session has surfaced over the last year. It's not to say that's the end, but we thought, significantly about what are the enablers or the blockers that prevent this vision of making buildings smarter. What are those issues? And that's where we came up with the 5 that Rick just briefly outlined. So the point being that we all get frustrated at times with getting our customers to, and the industry as a whole, to move forward and take advantage of all the technology and intelligence that is out there. And so what do we need to do differently? And so that's really what launched the whole idea of the coalition to begin with. We've got good ideas. We've always had good ideas, but how do you pull it together in a way that people might listen and react to? And so you need some sort of a operating framework, and that's what the C4SB is attempting to do. And what we've, as Rick pointed out, the assumptions we had really need to be tested before we decided to have this first review here today with the audience, with the Monday Live audience, because we said, okay, are our ideas or our assumptions valid or not? So we've spent the time to try to validate those assumptions by asking the right people that might be interested in hearing this message. What do you think? would you actually put this into government type regulations? Would you advocate in some kind of a formal way if this group exists, and we help you define through specifications and through communication efforts to get the word out that this is what needs to be done to make a difference for our industry. And so we validated, yeah, there's definite interest, and now we're at the point where we need to get more support for this undertaking. And because at the end of the day, the goal is not to have just a short list of industry participants benefiting from this effort, but really to have everybody in the Monday Live audience be beneficiaries of this effort. So that's really our bigger objective from a business perspective is, yes, participate, put some time and effort into this, and it will help your business today and tomorrow, particularly tomorrow, by being a participant. And you can help shape the message. You can help bring this message to at both the local and the state level. And a lot of our efforts right now, at least, are more at the federal level. But that's why we're doing this.
Great, Steve. Mark, you want to chime?
You're muted, Mark.
Unmuted.
Mark, you're muted.
Sorry,
There you go.
this isn't my day for technology. I was having technical difficulties. So anyway, apologize for that. So echo obviously what Steve said, but one of the things too that I've seen as part of this whole smart building journey, and now the journey to smarter buildings, is the fact that other institutions, other organizations out there, i.e. our government and the various agencies and departments within the government, are now becoming much more involved in the whole quest for smarter buildings. You could take it from the energy perspective, you could take it from decarbonization, so forth and so on. But that and their push for compliance, I think, is a good thing. In other words, getting our buildings smarter to reach certain compliance level, I think helps push what we as the industry are doing. And in order to do that, I think obviously there's several things that are involved, but data, as Rick mentioned, is at the key and at the heart of this. And I think we all realize that. And the fact that this coalition of coming together, especially of, let's just say, the tier 2s, the tier 3s, the tier 4 folks within the industry have joined together because each provides a complementary piece here of the puzzle. And together, I think, and collectively, we're positioned to be able to at least generate certain kinds of awareness and push for some plans of action. And at the end of the day, is part of our whole journey, and I think everybody will agree here, is that the information gap is been a challenge for all of us. And it's not new, and it remains a challenge. And I think this is one of the ways in which we can address this whole information gap.
Great, thank you. Anybody else want to chime in at this point? So let's move on. We're going to go through the 5 areas of focus, and we just want to talk about them, spend 5 minutes talking about them, and then we'll get to the top of the hour. And again, anybody on in the audience, please chime in if you have a thought on all of this. So the first area of focus is interoperability. So why is that important? One of the ways to thinking about this is that what we're after in this coalition, what we're trying to have to get done, as it were, is to scale up this industry. And one of the ways of actually thinking about that is that there are 5 million buildings, commercial buildings in the US. And in one of the documents that we've created as a recommendation for Congress, we basically said what we think we should aim for is to make 1 million of those buildings smarter, 20%. That would be great, right? Because right now I think we're somewhere in the 2 to 3% buildings actually have any kind of smart systems in them. So we want to bring 1 million buildings into to be smarter. And let's say we do that in 5 years, right? Which is not quick, right? But 5 years is actually quick for this industry, right? So 1 million buildings in 5 years, that is 200,000 buildings a year, which is 4,000 buildings a week, which is 800 buildings a day, right? Now, the question to ask ourselves is that, can this industry actually do 800 buildings a day, right? With the way that we're operating right now, right? Because typically the sort of buildings that we get involved in is large and complex, and we throw a lot of resources in it. And yeah, can we do 800 buildings in a day? And I'm not sure we can. So one of the mechanisms to address that and to get scale is interoperability. Interoperability, obviously, at the system level to make the systems work with each other, interoperability at the device level, interoperability at the communication level, but also interoperability at the business level and at the go-to-market level in terms of how people procure, as well as interoperability in the workforce level, so that the workforce can actually work on multiple different systems interoperably. I know that's a stretch on the word of interoperability, but that's kind of why interoperability is one of the 5, and it's really the first one, because without interoperability, there's no way we're going to get the sort of scale that's necessary for us to embark on this journey. So that's kind of my perspective on interoperability. I would love to get any other sort of thoughts on that, or comments, or we can move on to the next one. The next one being analytics. So, Jim, you want to talk about analytics?
I'd be happy to, Anto. So I think that, as we all know, analytics have developed over the past 20 years into a very powerful set of solutions, which can basically provide 20% benefits in terms of energy reduction, carbon reduction. It's been well proven in many studies over a long period of time. The problem is that the adoption of analytics have been very slow. And that is for many reasons, but primarily because, and I'll talk about this in a moment when we get to procurement, there's a fundamental problem that all money associated with buildings can only happen when they're built or when they're sold. But many of the energy efficiency value propositions, including analytics, are ongoing processes. So the industry heretofore has only been about projects and products, and it really needs to transform into one of process when I'm talking about the economic drivers. But analytics probably has the best bang for the buck in terms of quickly getting to lower carbon on the existing building stock without capital investment. So that's why it's a very powerful idea. And we're hoping to get the federal government to lead the way on this. One of the problems that we had before, and this goes back to interoperability or many things that Anto talked about, was the fact that everything, if we look back to the Obama stimulus, everything needed to be shovel ready. And I think shovel ready is a big mistake. What we need to do is rationally figure out how to spend the dollars to achieve the ends that we're looking for. That's it, Anto.
Any thoughts or comments from anyone? We can move on. David, I saw your comment, and we're actually going to come to that in a couple of minutes on split incentives. So moving on to specification. Rick, you're the chair of the specification committee within the coalition. You want to talk about that? You want to speak to that?
As I highlighted it when we were doing the intro, the specifications piece I think is really necessary to just literally tell people, here's what you can buy to accomplish something that's smarter. And to get to that, how many buildings a day did you say? It was 800 a day, or was it
800 a day.
Sounds like it might as well be 8 million a day. Sounds like a large number, but in my experience, if you give these policymakers something to do, you give them the roadmap of how to accomplish something, and if you help with the procurement's next, but if you help with the process by giving them a specification, you can get movement very, very quickly. Also, I think we realize that there really isn't a good specification for what is, how do I get data out of a building? What do I need to buy? If I'm at this point, how do I get to the next point? So having some templates for different kinds of buildings and different specific things to make sure that are purchased is really useful. Again, it's in scaling. Our industry is quite often start with a blank sheet of paper and create a lot of engineering time, start from scratch. And we're saying, well, you don't have to start from scratch anymore. We've actually got some templates, we've got some buildings that have actually been done, that have accomplished the right goals. Let's leverage those. But filling in those gaps on the specification documents and making those widely available and having them endorsed by a few architects and a few engineers and potentially even some other government entities is something we think can speed up the pace of adoption.
Can I just ask a question there, Anto, is that to me, I think, most of this is a US initiative. Obviously, it's something you would hope could carry on elsewhere in the world. But could interoperability and analytics not be, part of the specification by actually, whether it's the specifier of the building or the consultant, whoever, is actually specifying, products will be interoperable, whatever standard, without calling any out at the moment, but and also, the analytics will be used to achieve this, and that's something that could be written and therefore people could take to actually put into the specification. Whereas I think the other two, the procurement and the workforce, are slightly different from those ones. The ones above, to me, are something that perhaps could be joined up.
Yeah, we've actually had quite a bit of discussion about these five, and the fact that some of them overlap with each other and kind of support each other. And that's obviously true. But we actually wanted to highlight these five because they're individually important, right? But they all relate to each other. And one of the interesting things about it is that we're not really sort of ready to show this yet or talk about it a lot, is that we have the smarter stack that we've spent a couple of months, well, a month talking about on Monday Live, and we're actually adopting the smarter stack in the way we're thinking about that. So we're adopting the smarter stack as a structure or as a framework for the specification. And obviously the smarter stack has a role, has a place and a role for data, has a role for analytics and all of the other components, right? So that's how we're going to bring it all together. Because one of the key things that the coalition needs to do is to provide a consistent message, consistent message to the federal, for the administration, for the agencies within the federal, within the administration, for Congress, for state, and for local. And so the smarter stack is in a way, we've kind of created that in the Monday Live, and we're donating that to the coalition as open source. So that kind of becomes a way that we can actually structure the conversation on, therefore also structure the issues to do with specifications. So that if we do that, if we give the common message to all of these different stakeholders, the message is going to resonate and mean a lot more.
Yeah, and I kind of get that, you know, they need to be drawn out, the interoperability and the analytics, and that can be in and part of the specification. I guess it's those bottom two, the procurement and workforce, which are separate almost from that, but I'm sure that's something you guys could bring up in a second anyway. Okay.
Yeah, so Roger, from the procurement perspective, to Jim's point about how do you get an industry that is capital driven to embrace something that requires ongoing attention, you know, as an OpEx expense. How do you do that? So one of the insights we got in our recent meeting in Washington from one of the participants was that if we designed these specifications during the bid process to where the initial upfront purchase included, say, several years worth of support for the analytics analysis, that gives these government agencies time to put plans in place and budget in place to continue that in years 3, 4, and 5, and so on. So, because normally they don't have that in their budget because they're not buying it today. But if they buy upfront multiple years worth of support in the original capital purchase, that then gives them the runway, if you will, to plan for the future purchase of the ongoing support in the out years, which I think is a really good thought that I haven't seen really applied, and that may be one way in which to deal with this one example of data analytics and getting agencies to more readily adopt it.
That kind of suggests, Steve, that you got to get the real estate guys or wherever the owners, the people who are, you know, have the building, being actively involved, because what you don't want to do is during the bid process is the contractor saying, okay, we've got to cut out the bits here, and this is how we get the initial building. So we probably need more engagement from the owners in that perspective, or the developers.
Mm-hmm.
And don't forget that if you look at the smarter stack, the top two are, one is the purpose, why are you doing this? And the second one is the operations, right? The operations obviously speaks to the ongoing operation, because so it's all kind of interlinked as part of the stack, and the thinking is that this specification would support that.
Yep. Okay.
So moving on to procurement, our Mr. Procurement is none other than Jim Lee. So why is procurement important?
I think that we call it procurement, but it's really this idea that our industry works on 100-year-old principles, which are set up to acquire and fund buildings when they're built. And if we look at what we do, as there's a convergence between building automation and IT. IT is really an operating expense most of the time, not a capital expense. And as we become IT, we become an operating expense, not a capital expense. And so when I talk about procurement reform, we're really talking about how we think about buildings financially overall, not just purchasing. And so let me give you an example. If we look at IT technology today, it has typically a 3-year lifespan, whereas building automation has a 20 to 30-year time span. So if I were to try to presuppose what information technology we have today, if I tried to do that, say in the year 2000, we basically didn't have any idea. We knew that there would be more processing power and more memory and more network connectivity, but we had no idea where it was going to go then. What we're doing is we're asking building owners, architects, and the whole industry to presuppose where this is all going to be 20 years from now. And it's just a completely unrealistic thing to do in today's age. And I think the thing that is the straw that's going to break the camel's back and really cause transformation is cybersecurity. It's a very quickly moving target. It's essential, and it's a process. We can't predetermine what cybersecurity action or technology we're going to need 2, 3, 5, 7, 20, 30 years down the line. That's going to force more of this thinking into operational spending. If you look at most everything about a building that we've worked on over the years in terms of efficiency, resiliency, they're all processes, not products or projects. And we have an industry that only knows how to procure projects effectively. So that's the fundamental thing we need to change.
Thoughts or comments?
Well, one thing I think is these 700 or 800 buildings a day you identified certainly suggest existing building stock. And so I think we need a solution quick. And C4 SB is probably a good platform to get that out, and also using the software stack. I think we have a great opportunity to make this come on the next projects we're doing. And if it can be successful, then I think it'll fall more into the pattern. So basically having some projects, some demonstration projects connected to the site would probably be of use.
I think that's right. Although I think we've talked about it, and we probably don't want to use the word demonstration project or pilots. I mean, certainly that's kind of the feedback that one of the feedback that we're getting from DOE and others in DC is that we actually want to get on with it. This is not the time to talk about pilots and time to actually do things. So that's my only comment on that.
Yeah, bad choice of words. Now hearing you say them back, I hadn't thought of it that way. I was just thinking more of a place to outline success stories was one of the things.
Yeah, I think showcase kind of word is probably a better one to actually show what we're doing, and that's
Great.
very much in line with the conversations. So the last point is workforce, and those of you who've been on Monday Live for the past year and a half would have heard this group try to talk about workforce, and it's kind of been a little bit choppy or all over the place. But now we have a sort of a driver because workforce and job creation is obviously a key driver from the federal government perspective. We do have a member of the coalition that unfortunately was not able to be with us today, Melissa Boutwell. She actually gave a talk at the last AHR in Orlando about workforce, and she's grabbed hold of this subject, and she's actually going to be joining us next week and the week after, where we're going to dedicate a whole session on workforce development, or she'll actually make a presentation of what her thoughts are, and then we can talk about it more. So I think that's really important, and it's obviously very important because none of the things on the list of 5 is going to happen unless we actually have the workforce. Again, think about the 800 buildings and that scenario. So Ken, you're going to chime in on something about the workforce, and because you've been very vocal about the generational, your kids and all that kind of stuff.
Well, yeah, I think there is a transition going on here for sure. We're kind of always wondering, how is this IT? We kind of snicker at them and they say, well, they don't really have the depth of understanding of building automation systems that we do. But what is happening is the workforce is growing up in our industry, and they have a lot of these IoT skills, and they basically understand some of these new technologies and how they might be useful. And so that was sort of the example I presented, a good example of that. And even we struggled with it as a traditional company as to how to how to spin off this completely different beast that kind of evolved right out of the consulting term. Basically, the concept was what was being done manually by energy engineers turned into an automated process and followed more, the Bitcoin and that whole evolution of IT. And what made that happen was young people who worked a few years in the industry, got a sense of what we were doing, and then started, I think actually the Canadian government threw some research in there as well. And they got a data scientist and a bunch of folks involved, and they started looking at how can we automate this process. And that kind of all evolved into a different animal, and to the point that they said that, well, we're not even convinced we're in the automated buildings industry anymore, which was a concern to me, but I think they are quite right. They found new markets, new ways of doing it. And I think that's something we have to look at. And I think that has more potential of attracting the new workforce than probably our sleepy old industry.
I think just to mention something to back that up as well, Ken, was that you heard me talk about the trade association meeting last week with 560 people there. The biggest award with the most entrants was Young Engineer of the Year, but they went, the one key thing they actually mentioned was that young engineer is 35 and under, because they're also looking at people transitioning roles as well as just bringing in new people in, because they think people under 35 are still, perhaps more agile and flexible than we used to be in terms of thinking about they might want to change industries and roles. And it was really a really well supported award. And a lot of the system integrators now, because the trade association itself has got training, it's made a big initiative of it, and all the system integrators are beginning to take on what we call here apprentices, where they get finance them to go to college and train them for a 3-year period and so on. So it's really gaining momentum, which is good to see.
Yeah, indeed.
I think there's a lot of struggle too when they take a look at what it is we're doing. They say, wow, that's complicated. The IT industry does it a lot simpler. And so that's what we're starting to see, is them taking big pieces of the IT industry and saying, are you sure you still want to do this? This is what the industry is doing. So we're starting to see that transition. And then to your comment about the younger, I call it the kids, I call it, are like their 40s and 50s. But what I'm very much encouraging the kids to do is to get their younger mentors. And when they've done that, the feedback has been, you cannot believe what these kids are thinking. Their approach to the problems is just so completely different than ours. And that evolution is just happening daily, and it's accelerating so fast. So we need to get those people in, even though they scare the hell out of us.
As we start to wrap up, there was one question from Steve about government as a property owner. One of the things is not one of the 5, but one of the angles that we want to do, and we propose this to the White House, is to use government buildings as an example. Right, so that's a key part of it, and we'll see how that pans out. But with that, I think we need to wrap it up. Any quick closing work, Rick?
No, just
Closing.
appreciate the discussion, and thanks again for all the work you've done, all of you, and helping make this thing real. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, but we're also going to see, I think, a lot of rewards of moving the industry ahead.
Wonderful. And we'll continue this conversation next week and the week after for the month of September. So with that, let's bring this to a wrap. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Rick, and thanks all the attendees. And video will be up tomorrow morning. Have a great week. Bye-bye.
Bye now. Thanks.